Hey everyone, this is Leanne from Of Love and Shiplap and the founder of Sublimation graphics and tutorials on YouTube and Facebook. If you are catching us on either of those platforms and you're not part of our group or you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, definitely head over and do that so you can keep up with all of our video tutorials relating to design, sublimation products, white toner printing, sticker printing, and so much more as it relates to the apparel and accessory decoration industry. I am so excited to start off our new year incorporating Affinity Photo into our tutorial rotation. Our design tutorials alternate every other Tuesday, and it will alternate the Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer. So basically every first and third Tuesday is when you are going to find one of our design tutorials. Be sure to check out the calendar that's sent out via email if you're subscribed to my mailing list from my website, which is ofloveandshiplap.us, or that's posted in our Facebook group, Sublimation Graphics and Tutorials. Those links are in the video description, depending on where you are watching. Affinity Photo is an alternative to Adobe Photoshop. This program has the ability to open PSD files and honor smart object layers, which is a great asset, especially when it comes to creating mockups and using some of those other smart object files that are related to the crafting industry. This program is for roster-based freehand editing, so that would be the really dynamic drawings that you can do and shading and all the cool brushes that look like art textures in the real world, as well as all of that really in-depth cool photo editing. So there are a ton of capabilities packed into this software, and I've already been teaching those Affinity Designer classes and tutorials for the last 3 years. So we're a little bit overdue to start adding Affinity Photo, but I had to take my time to learn it as well. If this video is just an introduction to kind of cover some key things that you should know and some of the most popular asked how-tos within Affinity Photo. Now, we are going to be doing a lot of tutorials on this year. So as I said, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel or come join our Facebook group so that you can catch all of those. Our free tutorials that we put on our YouTube channel are always focused on task specific or project specific. So they are going to be, how to remove a background, how to create a sketch, how to merge two photos, how to freehand draw X, Y, and Z things. So they are very task oriented. If you are interested in learning absolutely everything there is to know about the software, how to use every single tool, how to apply it to your artwork, your photos, the projects that you want to create, then definitely head over to my website of loveandshiplap.us and click on that digital courses tab. We have our new Affinity Photo Digital Design Masterclass is up currently. It officially opens on February 7th. It's learn at your own pace on your own schedule. You can take whatever time you need to be able to go through it. It will be live then. And in the meantime, you can take advantage of the early bird pricing. This is the only sale price that there will be on this program. After that, it will be priced the same as the Affinity Designer Digital Graphic Design Masterclass, and you'll be able to use the $30 group discount code SUBTHAT. So if you haven't signed up for the Affinity Designer course and you want to learn that software as well, that one is waiting for you. Use the code SUBTHAT to save $30. You'll get the program for $99.99. And both of these digital graphic design programs, they're tailored to each specific software. They are perfect for beginners. They include one-on-one email support when you have questions, and they are both nearly 100 hours of video content, including immersive design challenges and chances to win prizes. There is no course out there that is as in-depth and well-built as the ones that we have put together. This has been such a labor of love, and I have enjoyed enjoyed watching those who are taking the Affinity Designer class completely thriving. So if you catch this video after February 7th, I'm sorry that you missed the early bird pricing, but there will be that discount code SUBTHAT available. And if you are catching it on our first run live or between now and then, definitely snag that early bird special price. It's 54% off. We do not offer Black Friday deals on this or our membership. So like when I tell you that there isn't going to be any other opportunities to save at this rate, I mean it. There will just be that $30 discount code. And, you can sign up for both courses and get going. The sky is the limit. You can teach yourself so much once you know how to use these softwares. You can achieve so much with your graphic design work, whether you're looking to offer it as a service, sell digital designs like I do. As you guys know, I have thousands of designs on here. All these different bundles and listings that I have as well. Or if you are looking to just be able to create that custom artwork for your finished products for your customers. So much potential when you have the skills. And if there is ever a good time to start thinking about building your new skills, it is when the economy is in a recession, because you are making a small investment that's tax deductible for your business to help you grow further after the fact. So definitely check those out. Again, it's right underneath the digital courses tab. They are web hosted. So you will go to my account, and when you're logged in, you'll see this courses option down here, and any courses you are enrolled in will show up there. All right, let's pop back over to Affinity Photo. So Affinity Photo, much like Affinity Designer, is laid out with lots of tools and panels all over the place. In order to access things to start, we need to open up a document or import a file. We can do this by going to File and New. This is going to be the option to open up a new document. You'll notice that you have a Presets tab where you can create your own set presets for your projects. So for example, a standard clip art size is 3600 pixels by 3600 pixels with 300 dpi. This translates to roughly 12 inches by 12 inches if you prefer to work in inches. Anytime you're creating digital artwork, you want to have a minimum of 300 dpi, so make sure that that is set accordingly. I always choose my image placement policy as embedded so that it will actually be within the file. The other option is linked, and this is perfectly fine to choose as well. But one of the issues with linked is that if you move a file on your computer or you send a file to someone else, like a design file to someone else, the photo that's linked, if it's not sent with it or not in the same place, will not show up. So I prefer to keep mine on Prefer Embedded. That is my recommendation as well. For sublimation, your color format should always be RGB/8. The CMYK rule applies to all other types of printing except for sublimation. The reason why is because all other types of printing are a liquid plastic. This is why all other types of printing have white. That's why we're talking about screen print, white toner, direct to film, direct to garment, plastisol transfers, UV printing. All of them have that capability because they are a different type of printing process. Sublimation is an actual scientific reaction that exists outside of our industry. And because the ink is being converted to a gas and then a solid state instantaneously, it's going to follow the rules of light, because gas and light follow the same rules. So that is why we use RGB/8. I know I didn't mention this in my Affinity Designer intro video, but I am making it a point to remind you guys that this is in fact how this works, because when you go to ask questions in other groups, people who don't know will try and tell you that it needs to be in CMYK. It needs to be in RGB for sublimation. Your color profile should be set to sRGB IEC 61966-21 for most devices. Some people with Macs do face color issues, and the alternative to use if you are using a Mac is the Adobe RGB 1998. So if you are using a Mac and the sRGB IEC setting is giving you some off colors, then try the Adobe RGB. That is a Mac specific issue. For Windows, you should definitely be using the sRGB IEC setting. Your color profile is completely separate from an ICC profile. If your computer has an ICC profile that was built in with your printer drivers, or one that was provided by your ink manufacturer, which that is where they come from, then that is something you will choose when you print your document. That's in your printer properties. It's not relevant to your document properties. There's a lot of confusion about this, so I'm making sure to mention this as well. These should be your settings. Choose if you want a transparent background or not by checking or deselecting the box. And if you would like to add this size to your presets, simply hit that plus sign. It will add it, and then you can right click on it to rename it, and we'll name this standard clip art. And now in the future, we can just simply click that preset and click create and open it. So you can set this however you'd like. And if you need to change your document units, perhaps you're more comfortable using millimeters or centimeters because you live anywhere but the United States, then you can change that as well. So when you're ready, go ahead and hit create and your document will open up on the screen. Now you can access more of your panels. Now I don't know for sure what the Mac version looks like, but in the Windows version, you are able to dock tiles or dock panels on your sidebar here. I know that in Affinity Designer, you cannot do this on a Mac. So if you do find that that's a difference, that is why. There are a whole series of panels that you can work through here. We're going to cover just briefly them so you kind of know where to look for things. The first step, of course, is your layers panel. Anything that you place on your document is going to appear in your layers panel. Your layers panel can consist of vector layers, pixel layers, and adjustment layers based on edits that you may have made to the artwork that you have created. If for some reason you don't see your layers panel or assets or color or something like that that you're looking for, go to View, Studio, and select your panel from this area. Also, if you happen to accidentally delete, or it seems like you deleted all of your toolbars, you can come there and find them here as well. See Show Context Toolbar, Toolbar, Dock Tools, and Show Tools. So these are 3 different sections, but the panels, that's View, Studio, and then select your panel here. And for example, if we chose Glyph Browser, it will go ahead and pop up right there. And you can move it around your screen, and you can also dock it. Like I said, if you have a Windows, you can dock it on the side. And I think, yeah, you can move this one here too. So this option might be what's not available on a Mac. Just for reference, because this has come up with Affinity Designer and I didn't realize that was a difference. If you ever don't want a panel or you want to know what the options are within a panel, you click on this little panel menu icon. So currently I have the Glyph Browser panel. So if we open that, it gives us the options to change our font size, clear what's are recently used, and we can click and drag to pull it out to get the little X and close that panel if we no longer need it. You'll find a panel menu changes depending on which panel you have, but this is where you can find your different options for that particular panel. Okay, as assets is something, these are ones that I have already built in. These can be textures, they can be assets that you've purchased. For example, I have this grid builder in here, which I'm going to briefly show you in a minute. So this is just another panel of assets that you can use. I've got different ones that came from Affinity or from the Serif website when I purchased Affinity Photo, and some that just came with things that I've purchased, different brushes and things like that that I have purchased. Okay, down over here, we have our adjustment panel, and we can also access our adjustments on our layers panel if we have something here by selecting the half moon circle icon right here in the middle. That's your adjustments, or you can click on the adjustment panel. This is where you're going to adjust all your color options, your brightness, your vibrance, your exposure. You can shift the hues of your colors as well. This is something that is covered in depth in the Affinity Photo Digital Graphic Design Masterclass, because all of this really does relate to photo editing. But I encourage you to take a little time just to play around with it. You can always benefit from using things like brightness and contrast, or adjusting the vibrance or exposure in a clip art element. or in a photograph. So all you really do is click on one and then you'll be able to access the different settings. We don't have a layer, so that's why nothing is showing up. You do need to actually have something on your screen to apply those functions to. Next up, we have our effects panel, which is also accessible through this little FX icon here. And there are some different effects here. I'll just draw a shape. I'm going to grab my shape tool that's right here. I'll draw a rectangle and I'll make it green. So here now we're able to use different functions. For example, outer shadow, if we wanted to add that. You can see that shadow's coming up there. I'll increase the opacity so you can see it a little better there. So we've got, a shadow, we've got glow options, we've got outline options. There's also, there you go, outline options, 3D and bevel, gradient overlay. So there's some really fun effects here. They operate just like they do in Affinity Designer. So if you've seen our videos where we've played with those, the same principle applies. They are a great way to just enhance different aspects of your design. Your styles tab comes preset with some different things like glitter. These are essentially preset groups of effects. So if we were to click on this one that says gel, for example, it's going to apply this whole textured color that's happening here. And then if we click on our effects panel, we can actually see some of the things that have been selected here. So there we go. We've got 3D, bevel, emboss, gradient overlay. All of those are part of that effect that gave us that look. You can find styles online. There's some different style packs on places like Creative Fabrica and Creative Market. I do find a lot of good stuff on Creative Market. It's not a membership site, so I try to be strategic there. But styles are just sort of a way to quickly have some presets that you apply to different layers of your artwork. And you can add to this yourself, just like with any other panel that I mentioned before. By clicking the panel menu, you'll see the available options for that panel. There is some free access to stock photos available from Pexels and Pixabay right here as well. So you just type in, and I don't know, I think if you type in like cat, something will come up. Yeah, so we've got a little cat here, and if we double click on that, oops. Well, I didn't mean to open it. I meant to bring it in. But you're supposed to be able to bring them in. There we go. You just click and drag to bring them in. Sorry, I don't actually use the stock photos. But just for reference, if you want something to play with while you're getting to know your Affinity photo interface. All right, down here at the bottom, key things to look for is your transform panel. This is where you can easily see your measurements and resize something. Always make sure to hit that lock aspect ratio, that little figure 8. You'll see that the little arms come off of it, and that will allow you to resize something and maintain the proportions that you want. Very important anytime you are changing the size of something, because you don't want to skew it like this. We see that happen a lot. That's not what we want to do. You want to always try and maintain the proportions that you have. And this is also where you'll go to resize something if you are working on a design to fit a specific substrate. So maybe you need it to be exactly 12 inches or 5 inches or whatever it is. You will come here and you can adjust your height and width here. All right, where should we cover next? Okay, so that's just kind of a quick look at this sidebar. This is where a lot of your panels are. You can move and remove any ones that you want. Me personally, I don't like having my adjustment panel here because there is an icon down here, so I don't feel it's necessary to have it. So you can just drag it out and exit off of it. I feel the same way about the effects panel, so you can drag that off and click that X if you want to get rid of it. And because again, we have this layer effects button here and we have the adjustments button here as well. So you can move anything around if you want to have something more accessible up there, if you want to have it floating, if you want to move it into this other section. Lay out your interface however you would like. If you would like to keep your interface as it is, once you have it set however you would like, you'll go to View, Studio Presets, and then Add Preset, and that will save everything that you have laid out. All right, so now let's just talk really quickly about what we've got going on at the top. So, or let's start on the side. Your sidebar here is called your tools panel. This is where all of your different tools are. Most of these are photo editing tools. They operate only on pixel layers. That means that if you create a shape that is not converted, that is not a pixel, that's still a shape, you're not going to be able to use the paint mixer on it, for example. All your tools apply to pixel-based layers, but you do have the ability to create some vector layers within this. Just like in Affinity Designer, you have the pixel persona and the ability to incorporate pixel layers there as well. So this is your tools panel, which we will briefly touch on the different ones that are here. Your move tool is the one with the arrow, and then your view tool is the handprint. Now the view tool allows you to move your whole document space around versus your move tool, which allows you to move your individual objects. So just there is a difference here. I don't personally like the view tool, but when you're working on photo editing, a lot of times using that view tool is an easy way to really focus on, move your project around and really focus on one area that you want to clean up or do some type of editing with. You can adjust the accessibility of your tools here by going to View and Customize Tools. And you'll notice that it'll expand all of your tools options, and you can drag whichever ones you would like. You can also add a certain number of columns if you would like that as well. Anytime you see a little white corner, that means that there are additional tools nested underneath there that you can see and you can access by clicking on that little white corner. Okay, this top area here is your toolbar. So tools panel on the left column, toolbar across the top. And underneath your toolbar is your context toolbar. So you'll notice that the context toolbar here was always going to change because it's dependent on whatever tool you have selected. So we have the move tool right now selected, so it's showing us our context options for this graphic that we have selected. But if I click off of that, we have nothing. If I click on the shape and I draw a rectangle, now we've got some different options to work with for our shape that we have created. So your context toolbar is just that. It is settings and adjustments that are in context to the layer that you have selected or the tool that you have selected. The first section of icons that you see here is your personas. The primary persona you're going to be using is the photo persona. This persona allows you to do all of your roster-based artwork creation. So maybe you want to draw something with your paintbrush, or you want to edit photos. You're going to do pretty much all of that in the photo persona. And this is going to give you the most access to tools in the software. Each persona does have a different set of tools because these personas are meant for different uses. So if we click over to the liquify persona, for example, it's asking me to select a pixel layer, which this is an image, so it's not a pixel. So if we right click and rasterize, it's going to make that a pixel layer. And now we can click over to the liquify persona. And the liquify persona has tools. You'll notice that our layout looks very different. These tools are just for warping and intense photo manipulation, we'll call it. So this is where you would work through some different tools to really distort your object. And then once you're done, you will hit apply or cancel. Because this is so much to go through, we're not going to be going through every single tool in depth in the software. Again, this is what the course is for you to learn everything that there is to know about every single tool and how to use them and their best ways to use them. But our free tutorials that we will continue through the year will be focused on product specific tasks. So keep that in mind. Again, if you have checked out our Affinity Designer tutorials, then you know our Affinity Designer tutorials in the group are always something that you guys are asking how to do. How do I photo fill a text? How do I create a photo collage text? How do I edit an SVG file? How do I remove a background? How do I add angel wings to someone's picture? We have videos on all of this in Affinity Designer because they're always focused on project specific. And if you want to know all of the tools, all of the features, how to do everything really fluidly, then you want to sign up for the masterclass. All right, next up we have the develop persona. So our develop persona, if you are not a photographer or don't have access to a high quality, professionally taken photo, you're probably not going to use the develop persona a lot. This persona is specifically for editing raw images. A raw image is one that is taken with a high resolution, high depth resolution camera taken by a professional photographer. It may even be in a TIFF format instead of a PNG. This persona is specifically for editing those. It's really not for editing, the picture that you took on your cell phone or took off of social media, because those photos are not the same quality. They're not actually considered a completely raw original photo. The device in which a picture is taken actually does matter. There are tons of photo editing tools. I'm just letting you know that this particular persona is very much geared towards that raw editing. So if you do have a professionally taken photo, I know that we have quite a few photographers in our group that take pictures and then use them for their sublimation printing business, then this is the persona that you're probably going to spend a lot of time in working on improving the color scopes and minor editing throughout of those raw developed images. Our next step is the tone. Oh, sorry, you always have to choose develop or cancel, or apply or cancel before you can switch to another persona. That's how your edits are applied. All right, next up we have our tone mapping, our tone map persona. And this persona is for HDR images as well. And this allows you to edit your color tones throughout it. We do cover this briefly in the masterclass. This is something that really rates specifically to professional photo editing. And if you are being supplied photos from your customer, you're going to be relying more on the photo editing tools that are in the photo persona than you are in these other ones that are more specified for those HDR raw images. So like cancel there. All right, and next up is your export persona. And this is where you can choose your settings for export. This is just one way to export within Affinity Designer, and it gives you a nice little preview, and you can choose to export each layer separately by creating a slice. And then you can just choose to export this one layer if you wanted instead of your whole document. There is also one other persona that will show up. It is called the panorama persona, but it's only available if you have actually stitched together a panorama within the software. All right, we'll switch back over to our photo persona so we can continue to cover our toolbar at the top here. Next up, we have some different automatic photo adjustment options. We also have some mask settings, which we're not going to be going over in depth in this video, but that is something that we will be covering in other videos. We have our snapping guides where this magnet is. This is something I usually have turned on. You turn it on by clicking on that little magnet, and then you click the drop down to check as many options as you like. I like all of mine selected because then when I go to do something like move this cat picture around, you'll notice that those red and green lines appear to help you easily align things on your document and align those objects with other elements that are on your page. So I use snapping guides all the time because I love how as you're moving around, they sort of pull it so that you can make sure that things are easily centered. Of course, if you prefer to not have to move around, you can use your rotation alignment tools here. If we click on this little panel, you'll see that you have different options for aligning and spacing, both vertically and horizontally. And depending on what you select, you can choose align to, spread, margin. If you have multiple objects, it'll give you some additional options there. And once you have your alignment ready, just hit apply. This little group here is to move your layers within your layers panel. So if we have this green, for example, screen square like this, and you can either move it in your layers panel by dragging it down. And this will put it behind. What you see on your screen versus what's on your layers panel is that whatever's on the top is at the forefront in your screen. Whatever's in the back is on the bottom of your layers panel. But you can also adjust them here, move forward one, or move to back. That will go all the way to the back. So you always have the option to move to the front, move to the back, or move one there. All right. Okay, so let's see. Let's talk about our tools panel next. Actually, sorry, before I do that, your navigation menu has a lot of options. When you want to save your working file, which you should always save your project source file so that you can make future edits, you'll do that by going to File and then Save As. When you choose Save As, it will give you the ability to save your file. You should always be saving a file that shows the file type as an Affinity file. That is going to be the file that reopens in the software, has your layers, allows you to make all your adjustments and settings. So that is always File and then Save As. This is different from exporting. If we were done with this and we wanted to export this to print, then we will go to File and Export. And it'll give us our options to export as a PNG. We'll choose whole document, or if you have something selected, it will give you the option to select just the selected layers. And then you will hit export. And once again, this will open and it will save, and you'll see that it's saving as a PNG file type. When I go to File and Export again, I just want to show you that there are multiple kinds of files which you can export from Affinity Designer. There are different settings among each one. Obviously for Sublimation, our primary format is PNG, so that's perfectly fine. But other types of printing rely heavily on vector-based files, which isn't really what this software is for. That's what Affinity Designer is for. But if you do have more vector layers built into this, then you could choose the the PDF, SVG, or EPS are all, and TIFF are all considered vector-based files. The rest of your navigation bar is, there are options based on the title of that specific navigation menu. So edit is going to be your basic options for editing. Text is going to give you access to your character panels and paragraph panels, your glyph browser, which are also available on your context toolbar. The majority of these settings are going to be available on your context toolbar, depending on the layer that you have selected or the tool that you are using. Your layers panel is one that you will reference a lot because this gives you all these different options for grouping and layering your different layers using mask options, visibility, merging layers. All of that is controlled in this layers panel. And some of those options do come up when you right click on your layer, depending on what layer type it is. You'll notice that you may have access to different types of options for a vector layer like our rectangle shape versus a pixel layer like our cat picture. Select is your, of course, selection options. Arrange, that's also about moving around your layers, which we did already briefly touch on that. You can move your layers within the layers panel by just clicking and dragging them around, or by using these alignment options here. Filters is, of course, different types of filters that you can incorporate to your photos. And view is another area you will want to check often, especially if you accidentally remove your context toolbar, your dock tools, or any of your panels. So you come to view and you will find all of that information here to allow you to quickly recheck them and implement them back onto your document space so you don't have to freak out that you ruined your program. You didn't do it. I promise. It happens all the time when you're not paying attention. And then of course there's the option to float your window. This document here, if you choose float, it will pop right out. And then you can just drag it until you see that shadow to put it back in place. And then there's, of course, the Affinity Help button. Okay, so there's just kind of a quick overview of where to find everything. Now I just want to focus on touching on some of these tools in our tools panel and going over the most common things that you guys will ask. So just to recap what we did already cover as common frequently asked questions when it comes to a design software. The first one being how to resize something. Any object can be resized by clicking on it, selecting your boundary box, which is this box with the nodes, grabbing any node and simply clicking and dragging with your cursor, or coming to the transform panel and manually resizing it using your width and height measurements here. There's resizing. Exporting your file, again, File, Export. That menu will pop up. You can choose to export your whole document, or if you have something selected like I do now, choose your selection only option, hit that export button, and it's going to pop open your documents folder so that you can save it, and you can choose your different types of file types here. And always, always, always make sure that you save your source file. That should be like the first thing that you do. Go to File and Save As. And when you do that, you're always going to be saving an Affinity Designer level of file. You'll see that it has a little icon next to it. And it will be, as it shows right there under Type, Affinity Photo File. So definitely important that you save your documents if you ever want to make future changes. This is another thing that I see a lot of people come and say, oh, I exported this as a PNG and now I can't make changes. Yes, that is exactly right. You need to save the file. So File and Save As. So the first three things you should be writing down are those, plus making sure to always go to that view panel if you, for some reason, can't find your tools or your panels. So those are the first four things I wanted to make sure we covered. And let's go ahead, and before we talk about these, I want to mention the clipping mask feature. Clipping is something that used so often and people struggle with it in other software. In Affinity Photo and Affinity Designer, it is super easy. Watch how easy this is. If we wanted to clip this cat picture into this rectangle, doesn't matter what you're trying to clip, it all works the same. You're going to do this by selecting the layer that you want to clip and making sure you're grabbing it by the name and bringing it into the layer that you want to clip into. So go from the click on the layer that you want to clip inside of another layer and drag it down, holding your cursor so that your cursor is touching the name of that layer and that you see that little 3/4 length rectangle that's semi-transparent underneath. That lets you know that you're going inside of that layer. Now I want you to pay attention to my cursor for a moment. If I were to put this to the side of the word rectangle, you'll notice that we have now merged our two pictures. So our green square is actually now the size of it's intersected with the size of our cat picture, which is not what we want. And of course, if you're above it, you're just going to be above it. If you're below it, you're just going to be below it. You want to make sure that you are getting that 3/4 rectangle, that your cursor is touching the name. And once you're there, you can look at your screen and see that our cat is inside of that rectangle, and we just release our cursor and there's that layer. If you need to resize this layer within your rectangle, you just click your anchors and resize it. So you have to make sure you do have that internal layer selected. So very easy to clip stuff in Affinity Designer, and you can do this with text, with blob shapes, with watercolor droplets, really anything that you can imagine. You can work with that clipping mask feature. So easy to use in Affinity Designer. So that's your number 5 thing to know. I'm going to drag that back out because we have other things to worry about first. Okay. Our first tool, well, our third tool is our color picker tool. Color picker is exactly what it sounds. It is a color picker tool. So if you want to use this, you will select the shape or object that you wish to fill. You will then select the tool and you'll bring it somewhere that you want to pull the color from. So let's say we want to pull the color of this cat. We'll click on our cat. It's going to bring that dropper here and automatically change that color for us. You can also simply grab the dropper from the swatches panel or the color panel next to your color wheels and drag it down and select a color. It will show in that, and then when you select that, it will fill. Color dropper, very easy to use. Next, we have our crop tool. So when you select your crop tool, let's select our graphic first. Select your graphic first, then select your crop tool, and you are actually able to adjust the range in which you can see from your graphics. So this is a little bit different than the crop tool in Affinity Designer, if you're familiar with that, because in Affinity Designer, you select your layer and then you are adjusting from the edges versus using the crop tool in Affinity Photo, where you're actually going to freehand select your area that you wish to crop, and then you can adjust it. And once you're ready, hit apply. And it will go ahead and adjust your whole document to just that area that you cropped. So see, it got rid of everything else. That's something you got to remember. It is going to constrain your entire document to just what you have just cropped. So it works a little bit differently because in Affinity Designer, it's a vector crop tool, and in Affinity Photo, it's a raster crop tool. So they do have a little bit different functions. Okay, next, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. I'm just gonna move that rectangle over. I don't know if we'll need it anymore, but move it over for now. Okay, so our next option is we have some selection tools here. So first up is our selection brush tool, and this is one that you're probably going to use quite often. I really like the selection brush tool. You'll notice on your context toolbar, you can add or subtract, and you can adjust the width. I always like to have mine set to snap to edges and also soft edges, because it's going to help get the closest refinement around the edge of a photo. Now this cat has some really soft edges because of how this photograph was taken, but I think we'll just see how it works. If we were to select the add and then start clicking all over the place, you're going to notice that we create a selection parameter. Now it does go pretty quickly. You can sort of move it around. You'll notice it's snapping to the edges because we do have that snap to edges set. It's picking up a little bit more than we want to, but that's okay because we're going to go back through and just fix that. Let me get sort of like the base set here, and then we'll zoom in. A lot of the work that you'll do in Affinity Photo is done zoomed in. That's why that move tool or view tool is the first one at the top. So then we'll select the subtract one so that we can sort of subtract out this edge that's a little too much. We don't want to cut off any of our kitty's head. Okay, I was going to use a picture of Jasper for this that didn't have all these soft edges, so I probably should have just done that, but you know, it just is what it is. We kind of got in the moment here. Okay, and then you can choose to use the add again if you want to sort of refine in some around these edges. And we can use subtract again to bring this part out. And that little kitty paw there. And we're going to need to make this a little bit smaller. Let's try 35 so we can really get this ear. Something to keep in mind when you're trying to do what we're about to do, which is remove this background, is that a higher resolution photo is best, and one that has nice crisp edges. So this photo is a good example of one that was taken. It was taken in a way that the background is purposely blurred to really bring the focus to the cat. This isn't really the best photo to use for removing a background, but I know you guys will be working with all kinds of artwork, so it doesn't really matter. So once you have your selection tool all set and you've got your little marching ants around everything that you want to subtract, we can also, or want to select. I'm just going to trim that up the edge. You can make any changes within your selected area while you have it selected. So the main thing that I like to do is remove the background, which is what you guys often ask me how to do. So let's start there. If we wanted to just remove the background of this, what we're going to do is go to layer and then delete. And it's going to delete everything that's selected. So when we hit delete, it removes the background of our cat. You can also hit delete or backspace on your keyboard. And then you're going to go to select and deselect to remove that marching ant. And now you have this cat that you can add to some other object, right? If you wanted to merge your pictures. I'm going to undo that because we're not done playing with this little cat. So there's removing background. It's very easy. You're going to use your selection brush tool is probably the best way to do it in my opinion. Then go to, once you have the background completely selected, you're going to go to layer, delete, and then make sure you hit select and deselect to finish things off. So we're just gonna undo all these things that we just did. There we go. So that we can get back to our cat layer where it was. Similarly, you also have the flood select tool, which works the same way. But this one's nice because you have the option to add, subtract, or intersect, depending on which one you select. You also have the shape marquee tool. So these come with a freehand selection tool, row, column, elliptical, and rectangle. And you will literally just select one and then select the area which you'd like to work on, and then any changes that you make will happen within there. So if we were to take this selection area and then choose our flood fill tool and choose blue and fill it, it will fill in the space that's in there. Because there's different hues, you are going to have to just adjust it. But those are your different selection tool options. And then of course your flood fill tool, which you just saw me use. Very simple. The flood fill tool will work on whatever areas you have selected with a selection tool. It fills it uniformly with one color. So this is not the option you would use if you wanted to make this background look more blue. That would be when you would choose your selection and then use your adjustments. That's where you would make that change. So something popular in photo editing is you want to brighten up a background because maybe it was a little dark when the photo was taken. That is the step you would use there. You would use your selection tool and then come over to your adjustments panel and work within these to make those modifications. So let's undo our flood fill tool. If you just use Control or Command Z on your keyboard, it undoes it a little bit faster. Okay, your next option is your gradient fill tool, as that would recommend. It does in fact apply a gradient over top of your entire shape. You can choose the context of that, whether it's your fill or your stroke of your object. You can also choose the angle. So you could have radial, you can have conical, and you can also choose bitmap. If you choose bitmap, it's going to automatically prompt you to import some type of JPEG or PNG, and you can import a digital paper or anything like that that you would want to use for an area. I'm not going to do that because it's not relevant to our cat. I'm just kind of walking you through some of the things that you would want to apply. Okay. Next up is your, we've got our paintbrush, color replacement, and our pixel tool. Your paintbrush tool is going to be your most common used out of here. This is where you'll come over to your brushes panel and you will select from the brushes that are preset in Affinity Designer or ones which you have purchased. As you can see, I've got quite a few that are in here. It looks like everything that was on my Serif account. So if you purchased from Serif directly and installed onto your Mac or Windows computer, then all you have to do is log into my account and anything you've purchased. So I think if I click on my account, there we go. Everything that I've ever purchased on the Serif website or received as a freebie is here. And I can just quickly install it. Now I do have other brushes and stuff I haven't installed yet, but just so you guys know, that is how all of these can get installed easily. And when you want to install, you just come to that panel menu icon and import brushes that you have purchased. So anyways, if I come over here, I selected my paintbrush tool, and let's say I wanted to do this Xenon Galactic's, one of my favorite because it adds all this fun stardusty stuff. So I select one of my brushes, come to my color panel, select the color I would like it to be, and then you can adjust the width of your brush, the opacity, the flow, the hardness, and you can also click on this More tab to be able to see how it looks and make adjustments via these sliders. If you are better with a certain type of visual, you can do that in here as well. Now, using brushes and whatnot is covered very in depth in our 2 different master classes, but then of course you can just, put this over. This is a little hard to see because it's white, but we could probably just move it over to blue. And then, yeah, there we go. So you can kind of see just the brushes in action here. This obviously is not one I would use on our poor cat, but just trying to show you this as quickly as possible. This is why we'll have all of our different free demos that'll be much more in depth about different types of projects. It automatically created a pixel layer. You saw that little that little icon that popped up that was saying, oh, we're creating you a new layer. But if you want to manually create your layers, you simply choose to hit this checkered board. It's add pixel layer, and it will create a new pixel layer in your layers panel for you to work within. Okay, next up we have our paintbrush mixer. And this, as it sounds, is actually a brush that mixes your colors. I'll just make it a little bigger. This is within your pixel-based layers. So if you have that selected and you've picked a color, so we've got blue right now, and then you drag it along, it's going to start mixing in the colors of your picture. So it sort of acts like a blur tool. Although I don't know how often you'll use it as a blur tool. I would consider this one to be one that you use more for a texture. If you are trying to soften a certain type of background texture, I would probably use the paint mixer tool for that. But we'll be doing projects with a lot of this stuff. And as I said, covered in depth in the Affinity Photo Digital Graphic Design Masterclass. So I'm going to undo that as well, so that we can just kind of keep working. I'm going to get rid of this pixel layer too. Okay, next we have our erase brush tool, background erase brush tool, and flood erase tool. So your erase brush tool, very important to understand this. This is going to erase based on the brush that you have selected. So like we were just using the Xenon Galactic, that's the shape that it is going to erase. So you can see it, how it looks all stardusty, because it's an erase brush tool, not an eraser tool. It does act as an eraser tool, but again, the nozzle of it is going to ultimately be whatever brush you have selected, which I love that feature because it gives you just some really great versatility within these tools. If you were just looking to add some texture to something or soften an edge, for example, versus actually adding like a white layer over top of something. So we'll get rid of that. Okay. And then we have our background erase brush. And as that suggests, you can work on that to erase your background, but also keep in mind that it is in fact going to follow the same rules because it is a brush. So the ones that you're going to want here are just going to be basic, and then something like that. And then have it erasing your background. So you can also remove your background this way. It's a little bit more time consuming, but that's another option as well. For erasing your background. And you're also going to notice it's focusing on the color that we had selected. So you'll go back through and manually adjust that because it does work little layer by layer. Always can adjust those context tool settings up top. Okay, I do prefer to use the selection brush tool to do my backgrounds, and then I would come in with the background erase brush just to sort of do like some refined areas. But the selection brush tool step that I just showed you makes it really easy, and that would be one of those things that I know you guys ask often about, and I would definitely make sure to follow. All right, next up we have our dodge brush, burn brush, and sponge brush tool. So these tools are all about increasing or decreasing shadows, tones, highlights, saturation. Your dodge brush and burn brush tool are going to be focused on increasing or decreasing your shadows, tones, and highlights. So you can use them on areas of your photograph where it's a little bit darker and you want to go ahead and increase shadows or decrease shadows depending on the look that you're going for. Your sponge brush is going to increase your saturation. So these are the kind of brushes that you'll select, and there'll be certain areas that you really want to focus on, and you will zoom in usually. I know I mentioned it already, but I will say it again. A lot of the editing that you'll do on photos within this software is going to require you to have your pictures zoomed in so you can really sort of focus on, the one area that you're trying to work on in a picture. Probably help if I have the layer selected correctly. You're going to focus on just that. So sponge brush is for saturation levels, and the dodge brush and burn brush are for increasing or decreasing shadows and highlights. And you'll also notice that in your context toolbar, you have options. So saturate or desaturate. And then if we select this one, you'll see what tonal range you're going to be focusing on. So mid-tone shadows or highlights. And as you brush over your area, it's going to increase or decrease those based on the settings that you've chosen in your context toolbar. All right, next up is our clone brush tool. This is the tool that you will use when you remove a person or an object from your picture. You will just like it said, because I didn't click first, you'll hold down Alt and you'll select what you want to clone. So let's say I just wanted to clone this background. So when you hold down Alt, you're gonna see that little plus sign appear, and then wherever you go with it is where it is going to clone and follow down. So see what's happening there? It's duplicating the wall that's to the side of us. Now, this, of course, is not the best example of this. This is something that you would use, on an outdoor picture where you want to remove other people who are in it and you want to replace it with the background that's there. You will use this clone brush tool, and you will find that you do have to come back and choose other zones that you want to copy. So if we hit Alt again and select a new zone, we can now add a new zone in here. Once you clone something, some things are easy to clone. Like if this was a wood background, this would be easy to clone because we would just literally be choosing our zone and moving over that wood background that we already had. But for something like this, a little bit more complex, which is where then you start moving into using these other tools like your blur tool or your smudge brush tool. So your blur tool is going to help you soften any pixels places. So if there's something that's a really strong line or is too sharp, you're just going to really work over it and you can soften it. You can also soften using the smudge brush tool. The smudge brush tool is another one of those ones that really helps you blend out different aspects of the layers and stuff that are in your artwork. What I like about both the smudge brush tool and the blur brush tool and the sharpen tool, so all three of those, is that they work in small increments. So you can see like our flow is set at 10%. So it's going to take a lot for you to really get it. You can turn this all the way up to 100% if you wanted it to be a stronger smudge or flow. So you see now I've increased it and it's, we can smooth it out a lot more and we can spend all this time evening out this background so it looks all softened and blurry like the back of our cat picture here that we pulled from our stock area. So you do that by adjusting the flow. But I do like that these automatically by default are at a lower flow percentage because it allows you to zoom in and really focus on getting the precision that you want without going too heavy of a hand at once. It really does make a difference. One of the things about graphic design that I taught in the Affinity Designer digital graphic design masterclass, and that is also stressed in the Affinity photo course, is to keep in mind that micro movements are everything. It does take time to make these edits and have really professional results. This is not the same as using some photo app on your phone that makes some quick edits and they might look good, but they're not actually professional quality. Don't get me wrong. There are some very impressive apps out there, but those are for quick solutions. They do actually diminish the resolution of your photo when you use them so that it's less obvious some of the changes that you've made. And when you're printing with sublimation, especially if you're doing photos, you want to try and maintain the resolution that you have as much as possible to have the crispest, most beautiful images. And that also means that when you're making editing, you're doing things in smaller increments and really focusing on those fine details. So, you got your smudge brush tools, your blur, and your sharpen. Sharpen does exactly the opposite of blur. It sharpens. Okay, then we have our healing brush and our patch tool, blemish remove, red eye removal. I think these are pretty straightforward. And, they are exactly what they sound like. Remove red eye if you have that in a photo. remove a blemish. If you see that patch an area of your photo, use your healing brush. They operate very similarly, where you select your area and then you rub it over and you heal. All of these brushes all follow the same rules of brushes. You are always going to adjust your context toolbar. If you want to use a specific brush type, you can select that over here, but the basic settings is what you'll choose by default. And you'll use them to make those edits within your photo. And of course, I just clicked off, but it does tell you, oh, if you need to use that, you need to click Alt first and then select the zone. That is true of most of these brushes that are used for healing or cloning. You always have to choose Alt and select the area that you're looking to heal and then work it across. So see, as we did that, we are now completely changing that background area that we were playing with our other brushes. And this is just a silly example, of course. I just want you guys to be familiar with this. We're going to have so many fun projects that I'm going to show you guys how to do different things, especially photo editing wise and graphic design wise, based on different requests that I've been keeping track of in the group. And you guys will be pros, especially if you take the Affinity Photo Masterclass. I know I've mentioned it a few times, but I just want to make sure everyone does know that we have it, because sometimes I release stuff and then people are like so surprised that they didn't know about it, even though I did link it and mention it and send it out in emails. Okay, so next up is our pen tool and node tool. This is actually for vectors, for creating your own custom vector curves. If you are familiar with Affinity Designer, I'm going to get rid of our cat because we're kind of done with that for now. If you are familiar with Affinity Designer, then I'm sorry, you're going to be a little bit disappointed that you don't have all the same functionalities of your pen tools and shape tools that you have in Affinity Designer, but you do still have some great options. But what I do like is that when you use the pen tool, you can also create it into a mask or a selection. So that's a fun feature that you can take advantage of when we have our pen mode, our smart mode, our polygon mode, and our line mode. And of course, all your options for how your different lines that you're creating can interact. And then if you need to break them apart or combine them or alternate them, those are all available here up in your context toolbar. And then your node tool gives you the ability to adjust your nodes or the lines within your nodes on your custom shapes. So there is some differences in the vector tools in Affinity Photo versus Affinity Designer, because these are two different programs. Affinity Designer is a vector-based program, so therefore all of the tools in your main persona are targeted at that, versus Affinity Photo, where there's just a handful of tools that are for that. We have our shape tool, which comes with plenty of predetermined shapes that you can use, and you can do something like select this, and you do have some options to change them. You'll always notice that there's these little red nodes on your shapes while they are still in shape format. And those do different things to give you adjustments to your shape. And once you're content with the shape the way it is, you can always choose convert to curves. And then you have the ability to use your node tool to make further adjustments should you choose to. We do some exercises where we create clip art working with our shape tool and our pen tool in the Affinity Photo Masterclass. And I will, of course, do some videos about simpler projects like that, so you guys can really learn how to create artwork even if you can't draw. Even though this program is heavily on the photo editing side, it is also for that raster-based drawing. That's why you have all of these really cool brushes. This is nothing. There are so many brushes available. You can actually use Photoshop brushes in Affinity Photo, but they may not necessarily have full functionality. Just something to keep in mind, because they are actually formatted for Affinity Photo, or I'm sorry, for Photoshop. But just keep in mind that you can import them and use this, but there's also some really great brushes, raster-based brushes available. If you're looking at brushes for Affinity Designer or Affinity Photo, just look for ones that state that they are Affinity Photo compatible and that they are raster-based, and you will have some great options. I actually have a ton I still need to install, so I should probably do that, because there are some fun brushes out there. And then there are, of course, defaults that are included. Our text tool is our second to last tool. I'm going to get rid of this curve and that other one that we made and this pixel layer, just so they're out of the way. So our text tool, we always have the option for either artistic text or frame text. Frame text is going to be text that's within a set parameter that you create. An artistic text tool is going to let you resize it as much as you want. So I want to point out the artistic text tool in conjunction with the mesh warp tool. Very common question that we have had asked is, how do we warp a design to fit a specific substrate, such as a conical style glass, or if you want to have your text fit a specific type of curved shape. This is not a functionality in Affinity Designer, so it's one that is often asked about. I am going to use this grid builder that I have for an example. This is something I purchased from Creative Fabrica. It's for giving you baseline for your text shapes, but you could really truly do this however you wanted. But I'm going to use this just as an example. So I'm going to just double click on one of these in my assets panel, and I'm going to resize it and center it on my page. And then I'm going to select my artistic text tool, and I'm going to click and drag, and I'm just going to type out hello. If you happen to use a grid builder or something similar to this, one of the secrets to it is that you always want to have your text touching the lowest point. So if that's in the middle or it's at the end like this, you want to try and resize your text to actually be touching that lowest point as much as possible. And this is going to help give you the best warp for your whole project. So I'm going to move this over so you can see it a little bit better. So once you have that sort of set, and because we're using this grid as our template, this is literally like if you were to bring in a template for a tapered skinny tumbler, you would have a template like this and you would follow the same steps. You're going to start with that layer that you have, your design layer, and you are going to select that layer, not your template layer. And then you're going to choose the mesh warp tool. And when you do this, it's going to give you some options. You'll notice this little assistant button popped up again. It's because it's creating that layer, converting that layer to a pixel layer. So then all you need to do is just bring your anchors up so that they align with the shape of your template. You'll also notice that you have these little arms you can adjust so we can get everything nice and straight, nice and diagonal to fit properly. This node is still not high enough. There we go. So we're making sure that our line around our text lines right up. And then we're going to do the same thing at the bottom. So be sure to use your little anchor arms to really help maximize this, and make sure that everything is lining up with your template, or in this case, this grid that I'm using for the text. And then once you have everything set the way you would like it and you're satisfied with the overall look, you're going to hit that apply button. Now, don't worry, this looks kind of jaggedy. Once you hit apply, it's going to smooth it right out. And the same thing will happen if you try and manipulate a picture. And then all you have to do is get rid of that template layer, and you have this ready to go to fit your specific object. So for those of you who have been wondering about warping text or being able to warp your design that you have created or a design that you've purchased maybe to fit a specific template, that's how you do it with your mesh warp tool. It's actually really easy. It's very user-friendly. And one of my favorite features is if you started a project in Affinity Designer and you wanted to use the mesh warp function in Affinity Photo. I don't have Affinity Designer open, but let me open it really quick. Okay. I'm just going to open anything. It's not really important what it is. Okay. So if you start a project in Affinity Designer, I know a lot of you are more focused on Affinity Designer. You're more versed in it, so you feel more comfortable designing in it. And that's fantastic, because this is vector artwork is the preferred artwork choice of all types of printing because it is infinitely scalable. But if you wanted to then modify this in Affinity Photo, what you can do is simply go to File, Edit in Photo, and it will open over here. So then you can literally take that shape that you had just made, that design you just had in Affinity Designer, and you can then apply something like the Mesh Warp tool, and you can modify this however you want. Let's say you wanted this to look like this, because this feature isn't an Affinity Designer, right? You hit apply. And then once you're done with that, you just go back to File and Edit in Designer. Now, I do want you to just notice that it's not appearing in Designer because you can't have it open in two places at once. So we just File and Edit in Designer. And the modifications that you made in photo will remain. And now you have that manipulated layer here. So that's a great workaround, since there is no Mesh Warp tool in Affinity Designer, that you can take advantage of in Affinity Photo. So I think I've covered our most frequently asked questions: resizing, saving your document, exporting your document, a brief rundown of our brushes, using the Mesh Warp tool, of course, most important, using that healing brush or clone brush when you want to remove an object from your picture, using the selection brush tool to remove your background, or of course the background removal brush as well, and then manipulating this. I'm sure there are plenty of other questions that will come up and we'll work through throughout this year, but these are really the most common ones that are asked in terms of things that you're trying to achieve within this software. So even though this was just kind of a highlight reel, I hope that you guys are able to take some of those key points away and feel confident enough that you can start playing around with all these different tools. I'm really looking forward to showing you guys all the amazing cool things that you can do in Affinity Photo. We have lots of cool projects that we're planning this year in our video tutorials, and in the Affinity Designer Digital Graphic Design Masterclass. Not only do we go through all of those in-depth options for photo editing, but we also work on cool art styles, how to turn photos into watercolor, how to turn photos into sketches, how to combine multiple photos. Like, these are the kinds of projects that I know you guys want to do, that we have built into that course. And we will be doing simplified versions of that are less in depth in our free tutorials in the group. So I hope you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Be sure to join our group if you're not there. And if you're really interested in learning everything there is to know, then go sign up for our master classes. There is nothing like them. One-on-one support, 100 hours of video content, interactive design challenges. They are meant to help you be completely immersed in the learning experience, feel really confident in your skills building as each lesson goes on, and help you excel with whatever your design plans are. If you plan on selling digital products, photo edits, services, finished products, it doesn't matter. If you are in the garment and apparel decoration industry, or sorry, the apparel and accessory decoration industry, that's the market that we are all in, the print industry for sublimation, white toner, direct to garment, etc., then there is something for you to gain from this. Our focus point is you and your success. So I hope that this did answer a lot of the most common, frequently asked questions about simple things to do. Like I said, exporting your files, saving your files, resizing objects within here, clipping, the mesh warping the text, removing backgrounds, and cloning to heal backgrounds or removed objects from backgrounds. So some of the most common things, I tried to make sure I made a list of those questions so that we could go over them. Like I said, we will have lots more videos and lots more opportunities to learn, and I hope you will join them for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm glad that I'm finally feeling a little bit better, and did manage to get through this without coughing up a storm. So thanks so much for being part of Sub That, and enjoy the rest of your night.